Well, this last week, Kayla ushered us into the third and final movement of the Psalms of Reorientation. We started at the beginning of this summer in the Psalms of Orientation, the times when life is easy, when we can see the path ahead clearly, when God is who we expect God to be. And we spent the next few weeks in the Psalms of Disorientation, also known as the Lament Psalms. These psalms are written in the dark valleys of life when we can't see clearly where we're going and we don't always know where God is. These psalms name rage, injustice, depression, dark nights of the soul, and doubt without rushing to fix those spaces. These are not seasons to rush through, but seasons to remember who God has been and to lean into our roots that we've developed in former seasons to sustain us. But the good news is that even though we all go through seasons of disorientation, we don't stay there forever. We are never left there. And so we reemerge in the season of reorientation. This is not a return to where we started as if nothing happened. This is emerging on the mountain to see a new dawn beginning. It's seeing a sunrise after your legs are aching from the hike up the mountain. It's something new, a contentedness and a steadiness that has actually been through the darkness and come out on the other side changed by it, not just pretending that it didn't happen. Reorientation acknowledges that the wicked do sometimes prosper and that depression is real and that doubt touches every one of us. But it is learning to stand again on new ground, having been honest about all of the difficulty and the darkness that we experience in life. And one of those places that we find this reorientation is in rest. So let me ask the question that the psalm is going to ask before we read it together. When did you last feel rested? Not just physically rested or caught up on your sleep, but rested in your soul. In my calling, I have the opportunity to ask that question to a lot of people, and a lot of people go quiet when I ask that. They can't remember, and maybe you can't either. When I hit a decade in full-time ministry, I experienced burnout for the first time. For those who might not be familiar with the term, burnout is a slow depletion that happens while everything on the outside looks like it's being held together. I was exhausted, but it wasn't about a lack of sleep. I was going through the motions of all the things that I used to love, my job, prayer, my hobbies, even rest itself, and felt nothing where there used to be joy. I had a shorter fuse with the people that were closest to me because there was simply nothing left in my reserve. I was pouring from an empty cup. But I didn't really allow it to show, only to a handful of my closest people, because I was a minister. I was the one who was supposed to have it all together, the one pouring out for everyone else. So I clung to productivity as a coping mechanism, always staying busy, specifically so I didn't have to feel how depleted I was. Maybe you know what that feels like too. And one day, as I was having lunch with my second mom, Judy, in the middle of this time of burnout, she asked me how I was finding rest. I thought, and I couldn't answer her. So she stopped and she put her hand on mine. "Close your eyes," she said. And she prayed the beginning of Psalm 62 over me 3 times. "For God alone my soul waits in silence. From God comes my salvation. God alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will never be shaken." For God alone my soul waits in silence. From God comes my salvation. God alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will never be shaken. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. From God comes my salvation. God alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will never be shaken. This burnout is one of the aches that Psalm 62 speaks rest to. So let's hear Psalm 62 together. For God alone, my soul waits in silence. From him comes my salvation. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I will never be shaken. How long will you assail a person? Will you batter your victim, all of you, as you would a leaning wall, a tottering fence? Their only plan is to bring down a person of prominence. They take pleasure in falsehood. They bless with their mouths, but inwardly they curse. For God alone, my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my deliverance and my honor. My mighty rock, my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Those of low estate are but a breath. Those of high estate are a delusion. In the balances they go up. They are together lighter than a breath. Put no confidence in extortion and set no vain hopes on robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. Once God has spoken, twice have I heard this, that power belongs to God, and steadfast love belongs to you, O Lord, for you repay to all according to their work. Word of the Lord. There is a difference between physical rest and soul rest. Physical rest is sleep, a day off, maybe a vacation. It is important, but it is not sufficient on its own. What David is describing is soul rest, a steadiness underneath the circumstances, a state of being that is not dependent on those circumstances changing. It is possible to be well rested physically and still soul weary. And it is possible to find soul rest even in a physically demanding season. But sometimes we find ourselves chasing the wrong kind of rest, and that pursuit leads to stress, to burnout, to exhaustion. David knows what kind of rest he needs, and he writes this psalm about that experience. David opens with that line, "For God alone my soul waits in silence. From God comes my salvation." Amen. For God alone. David isn't writing this as a young man who has never tried anything else. This is a man who has tasted power, wealth, military victory, popularity, the approval of a nation. And after all of it, David says that his soul's rest is found in God alone. Not God plus achievement, or God plus escape, or God plus the approval of others, but God alone. We can use a lot of things to substitute true rest for our souls. Many of us are quietly experimenting, if you will, testing whether something else, the next accomplishment, the next vacation, the next affirming word from someone that we admire, might actually be able to fill what only God can do for our souls. And those things aren't bad in themselves. The problem is not that these things are wrong. It is that sometimes we ask them to do a job that only God can do. Rest will not be found in a place or a thing. True rest for our souls will only be found in God. And once again, like so many of the Psalms we've read together this summer, it's important to notice that David is not writing this psalm from a peaceful moment. He once again names real enemies and active pressures that he's experiencing. This rest that he finds is not an absence of difficulty. This is a man under siege who chooses rest anyway. He goes on to say in verse 5, "For God alone my soul waits in silence." Again, he's not describing a passive feeling. David is actively pushing himself into this space. Rest for David isn't something that arrives when things start to look up. It's something that he chooses deliberately in the middle of circumstances that haven't calmed down at all. And after he makes that choice, there's an invitation to find rest. Trust in God at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to God. Pouring out our hearts is a pathway to rest, not a detour from it, because you cannot rest while you're still holding on to everything. You have to loosen your grip. You have to let things go. Something has to be set down before the soul can really settle. You need an anchor to hold you down so you can release it all and just be, and God is that very anchor. David closes the psalm with a line that quietly dismantles what drives our exhaustion. Once God has spoken, twice I have heard this, that power belongs to God. And that steadfast love belongs to you, O Lord. Power and love are not things you can secure for yourself if you work hard enough, or hustle long enough, or perform well enough. Power belongs to God. Love belongs to God. They already belong to God, which means they are not yours and mine to earn. They're only God's to give. When we experience burnout or exhaustion, I think sometimes it comes from this confusion. We treat security, worth, and provision as things that live somewhere out there ahead of us in life, achievable if we just push a little bit harder. We exhaust ourselves trying to secure what was never ours to secure in the first place. They already belong to God, and it is already offered to us in relationship with God. And we can spend our lives striving for something that God has already promised to give us: provision, approval, security, love. We need to know what we're running after, because if we don't know, we keep running that same exhausting race towards a finish line that was never really there to begin with. So, what is draining your soul? What things can you release or reduce in order to minimize what is taking life away from you? If we want to experience that true soul rest, we have to choose to make time and space to wait in silence for God. And this looks different for all of us. Even in my own life, it takes on different forms and different seasons. It might look like practicing centering prayer and meditation in the morning as I wait for God in silence. Or it could be a long walk in nature on a day off. It has been taking journeys to holy spaces and pilgrimages to physically journey with God in some seasons. In some days, it's as simple as leaving my phone inside and enjoying the sunshine on my porch. When our relationship with God is made up entirely of words and requests, we miss hearing what it is that God might have to say. We miss the opportunity to just be, the opportunity to be delighted in. We miss the gift of rest that comes from simply being in the presence of someone who loves us fully, just as we are. We miss those first lights of the sunrise that offer color to a new day. So, the invitation of Psalm 62 is to stop, really stop. Not to check out or numb out, but to let God be enough. To let the striving go quiet, because the things that you are striving for are already available to you. In a culture that measures worth by output and treats busyness as a virtue, choosing to rest in God alone is one of the most countercultural, deeply spiritual acts available to you. Psalm 62, the noise inside. It is very loud inside your life right now. Not noise you would see from the outside, but there's a noise that doesn't have anything to do with decibels, that doesn't turn off. It is the sounds of not enough, of behind, of what will they think, of what comes next. The constant low hum of a life being lived mostly in the future or the past, but rarely here in the present, and almost never still. You can't remember the last time that your mind was quiet. David says, "My soul finds rest in God alone." Not that his soul will find rest when the enemies are defeated or the situation resolves, or when he finally gets a weekend where nothing is required of him. Alone, one source of rest. The word David uses is a silence that is also a waiting. This is not the rest of disengagement or escape. It is the rest that comes when we stop striving long enough to remember that the ground beneath us is solid. To remember that the thing we're standing on is not our own effort or our own reputation or our own ability to hold all of it together. David commands his own soul, wait in silence, as if his soul is a restless animal that needs to be spoken to. As if stillness is not a passive thing that happens to you, but an active, daily, sometimes hourly choice to stop reaching for the next thing, to let yourself be held by who is already there. What are you using to manage the noise? Perhaps it's the productivity that keeps you from feeling the uncertainty that lies underneath. The busyness that's become so normalized you've stopped noticing it's your choice. The scrolling that fills any moment of rest. The way you always have something playing, a podcast, music, a TV show, because the quiet, if you let it arrive, always asks the questions that you're not ready to answer. We are very creative with the ways we avoid stillness. Pour out your hearts to God, for God is our refuge. This psalm offers a release, not the release of escape, but the release of surrender, of opening your hands and letting out what you have been gripping so tightly, of saying into the silence, I have been carrying things that are not mine to carry. I have been striving for things that only you can give, God. I am tired. I need you to be who you say you are, Lord. Power belongs to God. Love belongs to God. The thing you're exhausting yourself trying to secure by your own effort, God is the source of all of it. And the path to get those things is not more effort. It is less. It is the discipline, the daily demanding discipline of being still. It is not the reward at the end of the next hard season, the rest you'll finally get once things calm down. Because things never calm down. Not really. The busy person who promises themselves rest when this current urgency passes discovers when it passes that another urgency has already arrived. But the rest that David finds is found in the middle of the noise. It is the inner stillness of a person who knows whose they are and where their help comes from. A person who returns to that knowing every day, every hour if necessary, casting and recasting the weight of their burdens onto the one who can hold them all. Be still. Not later, now, just for a moment. Let the noise be there and choose underneath it, despite it, to rest. God is enough. This week, may you stop striving for what God has already promised to give you. May you pour out what you have been carrying, trusting that release is a pathway to rest. And may your soul find its rest in God alone. Amen.